So, what is the biggest gift you can give your team members? That is going to be the topic that we're discussing today on this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Julia Felton, and I'm going to be your host and guide whilst we go through a topic that I think is really pertinent. I think more important today than ever, and a leadership skill that we rarely talk about. And the topic that I want to talk about today is attention, because I actually believe that your attention is the biggest gift you can give your team members right now. Often, when we think about what do we give our team members to incentivize and motivate them, sometimes people go when I chat to clients about pay rises or better tech or benefits. I just saw recently that Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO, he's actually created a gym within his workspace for his team members. And yes, all of these are useful, but I would actually like to think that giving your team members your attention is the biggest leadership superpower that you can have. Because we live in a world where we are starved of time, and actually being able to stop and really pay attention and give your team members your undivided attention whilst being fully present is something that they can rarely get. They rarely get it from you. They rarely get it from their family, from their spouse, from their kids. When we're not giving people our full attention, I actually think it's quite disrespectful. But time and time again in the workplace or in interaction socially, I end up communicating with people that are only half listening. We've all had an experience, haven't we, where maybe you've walked into your boss's office. I know that this happened to me when I was in the corporate world. And you go in, you'd ask your boss a question, and they carry on tapping on their keyboard, right? And whilst you're talking to them. So they were just only part paying attention in the conversation. And that is actually a recipe for miscommunication and for problems going on. But that's a topic for another podcast. But today, I think it's really important that we realize that the real brutal truth is that where our attention goes, our energy flows. So if our attention is very scattered, very fractured, so is the people that we're interacting with. But when we're fully present, people's energy matches ours and everything comes together in sync. So this is why today I really want to talk about attention as a leadership superpower. And I think this is the thing that can really help business leaders go from being busy to being brilliant within the workplace and therefore fuel high performance teams. So let's have a look at why paying attention matters in the workplace. Because when we're paying attention, we're doing more than just listening. We're actually listening with our whole body, and team members can pick up on that. And what we're really telling them is that they really matter. As human beings, we are wired for connection. And when somebody is really truly present with us, with no phone and no wandering mind, it really validates our own worth. And it says, you're important enough for me to give you everything that you need and for me to stop everything else I'm doing. So this is why paying attention on one level works, because it really helps our team members feel validated, feel engaged, and feel that they mattered. And I think in a world where we are so low on connection, we live in this world where we've got hundreds or thousands or even maybe millions of Facebook friends and followers or on whatever platform that you're using. But actually, people are really disconnected. And this is something I was talking about back in 2012 when the internet was in no way as prolific as it is today. But I was talking even back then about how we as a society are becoming disconnected. And I'm just seeing this happen more and more and more. Paying attention also matters because it helps create that psychological safety. It signals to our team members that it's okay to share and make mistakes and be honest here. And that's what creates that cohesion. We want to create an environment in the workplace where people feel psychologically safe, where they can try new things, they can experiment those new things, and know that they are supported. And also, when we can create psychological safety in the workplace, then we can have open and honest conversation. And that's so important to really unpack about what is really going on in the business at kind of the level of the iceberg that we don't often see. When we're paying attention, we really hear what is being said. And I always think it's fascinating that we never in school are taught how to listen, how to pay attention. And I think so many of us really just hear what's being said because we're only half paying attention to what's actually being articulated at that moment. And I know, and I'm sure you've also had this experience. Maybe in the workplace, you're walking along the corridor, you ask somebody how they are, but before they've even answered, you've already walked off. And you're probably not even going to hear what they say. Or if you do hear what they say, you're not actually, you weren't really listening to it. And you're like, oh, great. And maybe they said something that was slightly negative. And you're like, you gave completely the wrong response, which just showed them that you really weren't hearing and listening to what they were saying. And I think this is the difference between really paying attention and being fully present when we're listening to somebody, is that we notice more. We notice the tone, the hesitation, the body language, what's not being said. And often, in my experience, these clues reveal more than the words themselves. So, when we're really paying attention, we can be really listening for what people don't say as much as what they say and how they say it and the nuances in their language. Also, when we pay attention, we reduce rework and misunderstanding. So it means that because we're paying full attention, we don't just half listen to something. And as I said earlier on, when we half listen to things, that's when we get miscommunication going on. So when we're paying full attention, it ensures we get clarity up front, and that actually saves us time and frustration later on. And paying attention also matters because you're actually in an exchange of energy, not just information. Because when we pay attention to something, it is an energetic exchange when we're fully present. And the other person leaves the conversation feeling more motivated, more confident, and more engaged. And when I was thinking metaphorically, what's this? It's a little bit like sunlight in a forest. Well, the things that we pay attention to, that we shine our light on, they are the things that grow. But when we don't pay attention to things and it's absent, those items wither. I just think that's such a great nature metaphor for the power of paying attention. So, as I said, where attention goes, energy flows. And where energy flows, life and business grows. I think that's such an important thing for us to remember. So, what's the cost of us having scattered attention? Because we live in a world where, to some extent, we've normalized distractions and we've glorified multitasking and we've convinced ourselves that busyness equals value. But here's the thing, you can't lead what you're not paying attention to. And there was an incredible video I saw this week on LinkedIn. It was from one of my mentors, June Gunter, who is the founder of Teaching Horse, which is a leadership development company where we partner with the horses. And I'm one of their international facilitators on that program. And June is actually recording a video. And what's really interesting is that the horse tries to sneak up behind her while she's talking. And actually, she stops in the middle of the video and turns around and acknowledges the horse. And why does she do that? Because the horse was really at that moment testing her. She'd never met this horse before, but he was testing her. It's like, how can I test to make sure you are paying attention to what's going on? Of course, if June hadn't turned around and ignored the horse, it would have sent a message to him that she doesn't know what's going on in the surroundings because she's missed him sneaking up on her. And therefore, she's not trustworthy because what else is she missing in the surrounding environment? And for a horse, of course, a horse is a prey animal. And so it's really important that they're always paying attention to the danger around them. So why would he want to give his leadership to June if she's not paying attention? Because she's not going to be able to keep him safe. So it's also a little bit of the same in the workplace. Our team members want us to be able to pay attention to everything that's looking around us. They want us to have this peripheral vision to see what is going on in the environment in order to keep them safe. And we can't do that if we get stuck in and drawn away by all of these distractions, or we're engaged in multitasking, so we're only part paying attention to what's going on. And I pulled out some statistics for you, which I just think are incredible because they really just paint a picture of how chaotic the workplace is and how difficult it is for us to keep attention on anything. Because the average leader is interrupted every 8 minutes. Think about that. The average leader is interrupted every 8 minutes and switching tasks hundreds of times a day. Now, there was some research done by Google once upon a time that showed when every time you were maybe doing a task and you were in flow and maybe you were writing a paper on something, and then, your phone rang or an email pinged up and you got distracted, you went and dealt with that. It took you about 20 minutes to get back to where you were before you started. So this is why it's so important that we protect our time, because if you think about all those wasted 20 minutes throughout a day, it's not surprising in the workplace we don't actually get a lot of work done. And this is why it's critical that you carve out time that is dedicated, undisturbed time. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. Because I think we've also fallen into this trap of mistaking busyness for value. If we're really busy and we're doing lots of things, we must be adding value. But actually, I think a lot of us are still stuck in busy work. And that's often caused by our misplaced attention, and that's costing us trust, focus, and results within the workplace. So I want to just talk about a concept I've designed called the attention triad. So attention isn't just about focus, but it's a three-dimensional force that shapes everything your team experiences. And the three areas are, it's about mental attention, which is what we're thinking about and the priorities we're holding in our mind. Often when we're having conversations with people, we're not present because we're thinking about what happened earlier on this morning, what might happen tomorrow, what might happen next week. So we're not paying attention mentally. Often as well, maybe we're not paying attention emotionally because our feelings and attitudes that we're bringing with us can mean that we're not fully in the moment. We're tied up in the frustration that came from a previous meeting or something that we previously heard. And when we're carrying that kind of emotional baggage, it's very difficult for us to be fully present, to pay attention. And then the other area of the triad is the energetic attention, the vibe that you radiate that people unconsciously pick up on. So all of us create an energy vibe around us. And it's really important that we think about that, whether that's a positive or a negative energy vibe. People want to be inspired and motivated. You're going to have to put out a high energy, positive vibe in order to do that. But I think when we can align our mental attention, our emotional attention, our energetic attention, that's when we can form great relationships and build amazing connection with other people. And we've talked a lot in the past in our other podcasts about social capital and how social capital and the relationships we have in the workplace are one of the most important things we can invest in. So if we're going to build those relationships, that's beholden on us to actually really pay attention to the conversations that we're having with other people so that we can fully connect with them. I'd also like to just share with you that I think that attention happens on multiple levels as well. And I've identified 3 levels of attention. And we see these happening really quite eloquently within the horse herd. But the 5 levels of attention, we need to pay attention to ourselves, how we're feeling, our intuition, our gut instinct, what's going on. We've all had conversations with people and you're like, I'm not sure they're going to be a good client fit, or I'm not sure this is going to be a great team member to have or to bring in. You get that gut feel, that intuition. So really important that we're paying attention to what our body is saying. Because remember, there's more brain cells in your gut than actually in your head. So your body can give us loads and loads of information if we are just paying attention to it. The second level of attention is on others. So awareness of other people's energy, mood, and unspoken signals. So remember that communication is over 70% nonverbal. This is really important that we think about, really pay attention to how other people are showing up. What's their level of energy? What's their body language saying about how they're feeling in that moment? Because that can give us a lot of signals. And you might be guilty like me of having had the situation where you've walked up to somebody, you've asked them how they are, and they're saying that they're fine. And instinctively, right, you listen to your body, you hear that gut feel. You can see from their demeanor that they're clearly not okay. And as humans, we're great at saying one thing while our body and our senses are telling us something else. So really important that we're tuning in that to see that. And also the third level of attention is the environment. This is the bigger picture. On a business context, it might be the market shifts, what's going on in the competitor landscape, for example. It might be the mood and the culture within your environment, or maybe the undercurrents in the room that we just need to acknowledge. But if we're not paying attention, we don't see those things happening in the environment. So I think that attention is not a luxury. We actually need it for our survival and for our businesses to thrive going forward. So this is why I'm calling attention a leadership superpower, because as a leader, you really need to embrace this if you're going to create a thriving environment. And there is something that I've created called the Attention Continuum. And I really want you to think about this because I think this is really important. What's the difference between where you put your attention and where you place your attention? Because this is where most leaders are leaking impact within the organization. Because we're spending our day putting our attention on what shouts the loudest. It might be that email ping. It's the crisis or the drama of the day in the workplace. So when we're thinking about where we're putting our attention, it's very reactive. It's driven by the noise around us. And I'd love you to contrast that with placing your attention, which is different. This is a very conscious and deliberate choice. And it's planting our focus exactly where it will grow, and we're going to get the outcomes that we want. We're going to get the outcomes we want where the business is going to move forward because we're not stuck in all of those distractions. So an invitation for you might be to think about one thing you've been putting your attention on that isn't deserving of your time and isn't moving your team and business forward. And where instead could you place your attention this week? So just want to talk about the 5 attention hijackers. These are the things that come along that stop us being fully present and paying attention. And they can erode our focus, our productivity, and our well-being if we don't manage them. So the first of them is digital distractions. So these are things like our smartphone, constant notifications, news alerts. The second is this multitasking and context switching that we spoke about earlier on. It's about trying to do multiple things at once and splitting our focus so nothing gets our attention. Every switch between a task comes at a mental cost. And I recently came across a piece of research, and if I recall it correctly, it said that only about 2% of the world's population can actually effectively multitask. Most of us, even though we believe we can, we can't. And I know from my own experience when I have been maybe listening to a webinar, for example, and I get distracted and start doing email, I miss a key piece of content on that webinar. So even though I thought I could multitask, I can't. Another attention hijacker is reactive work patterns, because I think we've become a culture where we think and believe we continually have to respond to everything that pings on our desktop. And so we become very reactive rather than prioritizing deep strategic thinking work. And we end up just doing things for the sake of doing them rather than, again, consciously thinking, what is the value of this? And the fourth attention hijacker is mental clutter and cognitive load. Overthinking, rumination on what's going on, replaying past events, or even fast forwarding and preempting what might happen on future ones. And when we've got too much mental clutter and cognitive load, this can lead to decision-making fatigue. And as a result of that, we're not as productive and effective as we could be. And the fifth attention hijacker is all about the environment and lifestyle factors. Because I think many of us, we've just talked there about mental clutter, get stuck with environmental clutter, stuff all over our desk, and all of the things that are around on the desk. They can create visual and auditory distractions for us. So, really important that we think about, what's our work setup? Is it clear? Does it provide the ability to focus? Are there a load of things around that you could easily get distracted on? I'll just sort out these papers, or I just do this, or I just do that. Another attention hijacker is often the lack of rest and sleep. A lot of the research says we really need 7 to 8 hours decent sleep a night. So is your work schedule set up and your life schedule set up to accommodate that? And also, are we eating properly? Are we fueling our body in the right way? Again, if we're not, then that can become a real hijacker of our attention. I know when I haven't eaten properly and I'm working, then all of a sudden I'll get all these hunger pangs and my attention gets distracted and hijacked to go to the fridge and get some food. There are things that we can do to mitigate these 5 attention hijackers that I talked about. So, some of the ways that we can improve and overcome the attention hijackers are making sure that we really get clear on where we're strategically placing our attention and turn off all your notifications or anything that can distract you. My phone, something that I learned when I trained with the Flow Research Collective of how to get into flow, is to make sure that all your social media apps are on the last page of your phone and you actually make the screen of your phone black so you don't just get distracted by pictures or anything else. It's also about doing one thing deeply before moving on to the next. So do something and finish it before you move on. And as a result of that, you really need to protect your diary, protect your meeting time, and create blocks where you can have uninterrupted times that you can actually get work done. And you also need time and schedule time in your diary for clearing the mental clutter through reflection and planning. Make sure, as I said, your desk and your environment supports your deep work. And finally, really think strategically about, how do you work with your natural energy rhythms? What times of days are you most productive? What times of day are you least productive? And schedule your day around that so you can work in rhythm with your natural energy and not against it. In conclusion, I'd just like to remind you that your attention is contagious. And as a leader, if your attention is scattered, your team will have scattered energy. Whereas if your attention is grounded, you're more likely to have a unified, cohesive team. So the challenge this week is to choose one thing that matters the most. Consciously place your attention there and notice the shift in the energy. Because there is an art in choosing where to place and distribute your attention in ways that contribute to the health and harmony of your team and the community that you work in. So, really hope that you found this whole concept of attention as a leadership superpower really powerful this week. I'd really invite you to make sure that you go and take our Turbocharge Your Team quiz at businesshorsepower.com/quiz. Simple 12 questions, and they are going to help identify within your business which areas you need to focus on the most. And then you're invited, if you'd like to a turbocharge your team call so that we can unpack that. And I will be sharing with you tips and strategies to help you improve your team performance through that. So please do go to businesshorsepower.com/quiz, take the quiz there. And I'm sure you'll find that super valuable because attention is everything. It is this leadership superpower. And I'd really love to hear how you are using attention as a leadership superpower. So please just drop me a note and let me know that. Okay, hope you have an amazing week and see you all next time. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.